All right, so this next one, they tried to anonymize it, but pay no attention to the name of the tab up at the top. Otherwise, it shows their name. But we'll pretend that Brian didn't do that on the resume. All right, so here's the second one. This is more of a North American style resume where it's down to one page. There is a lot of content on here. So again, typically what I like to do is I like to kind of zoom out and get a feel for the balance on the page. I do like the darker blue. It's not as dark, I don't think, as like what they've actually got as their name. The curly brace initially was a little bit confusing to me because the only one that really stood out was the one next to all of this blank space down at the bottom. So I noticed this one. I'm like, why is this down here? They're trying to draw attention to this stuff down here at the bottom of the page before I realized that this one existed up here at the top. And so again, is that kind of thing necessary? Nah. I mean, it does kind of stand out like, oh, okay, that's kind of a neat kind of thing if you're into like JSON or something like that. Is it super necessary? No. I would typically take that kind of thing as well as all these icons. I would ditch all of those. I would also ditch these little boxes on here as well. It's just taking up space. And it makes having these things with all these bullet points where they're not in strict column width actually makes this a little bit harder to kind of read and see things. And so I think that there's a better way of sort of laying out these skills. The other thing you'll notice, because this is a PDF, as I start to highlight text and kind of drag across the page, notice it, well, I don't know whether you'll be able to notice, but as it highlights all of the word technical skills, I want to try to drag it over Ruby and Rails, but as soon as I drag down into Rails, it didn't highlight any of Ruby. And as soon as I start highlighting RSpec, it highlighted Postgres and Travis CI down here. My worry with this is if I try to copy this whole block, that this isn't going to play well. So what I would typically do is hit Control A on the page or Command A on a Mac. So I'm just going to try that here, see if that's going to work for me. So I'm going to hit Control A, and then I'm going to copy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this into an editor. And what I want to do is I actually want to see what this is going to look like in an editor if I paste all this text into just a plain editor. And just to show you what an automated or what the automated tracking system might see this as. So let me get my code editor up here. Where's my code? There's my code. So this is a cut and paste of the text off the resume. And so if we scroll all the way back up to the top, this is just the raw text copied and pasted onto this page. So it's definitely going to pick up keywords. Like it's going to see like, oh, Heroku is in here, Bootstrap is in here. But notice education has all these spaces in between. Software engineer has all of these spaces in between. And so if I search in here for software engineer, I see that you got a certificate in software engineering, but that's the only hit on the page. So it's a good thing that your certification is called software engineering, because that didn't come out from that heading up here, because of how you've actually written that on the page where it's like spacing this stuff out. And so this can be one danger of using different kinds of tools for these, is when it's producing the PDF, is it actually producing the text in a readable way? Like awards. Like if I was trying to find somebody that received awards, if I search this for awards, I get no hits. Technically the word is on there, but because of the white space on there, it's actually not finding it. So just be aware of those kinds of things. And then, you got contact me, but then the email is actually above that. And then the phone number, and then LinkedIn, work experience, and so on. And then again, with the vertical bars, again, just my own preference. I like to not use vertical bars. They do a pretty good job with their dates on here, but again, I would like to see the dates with months in there as well. So just to kind of give you an idea, like when an applicant tracking system is like, if it's scraping that PDF for text, this is what it's seeing. Now, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because applicant tracking systems, they're just automated and they're looking for keywords like, oh, you want Rails? Well, let's search for Rails in here. Yes, Rails is a hit. Let's go search for, MongoDB. Well, there's no hits for MongoDB. Let's go search for the word REST. I do see REST If I search for RESTful, I don't see it, but if I see, I do see REST in there. So if I'm searching for someone with Rails experience building REST APIs, I'm seeing that. If I type the word API, I see third-party API consumption. One of them with a capital C, one of them without a capital C. So again, be consistent on that stuff. But this is what an applicant tracking system is kind of going to see as it's scraping through that PDF looking for text. And so just be aware of that. So let's switch back over to the browser, and let's kind of dive back in and take a look at what else they got on the page here. Let's see if I can unhighlight. There we go. Again, I'm not a big fan of having your geography on the resume. They can bias against you if you're trying to get a job in a specific location you don't already live there. And so if you're looking for a job in that city and in that state, then you can put that on there if you already live there. If you're looking to relocate there, you can put that city and state. So they think that you're local. And when they say, when do you want to start the job? And say, well, I'm actually in the process of relocating there right now. So I can start in a couple of weeks or something like that. You definitely want your phone number on there. Definitely want your email address on there. But I would drop the icons. I don't know that icons are really necessary for something like this. Technical skills. So applicant tracking systems, it also puts sort of a weight and a priority on left column versus right column. And things in the right column carry more weight than what's in the left column. The fact that all of your technical skills are over here on this left column means applicant tracking system may not give it as much priority as keywords that it sees over here on the right side. So just something to be aware of. It is something that I've heard in passing from people talking about applicant tracking systems. So you may want to move these skills over here at the very top. Now, in this case, you've got all of your work experience and you've got your education, you've got your projects over here. But again, when I'm looking at your resume, my eyes are going to take the path of least resistance. And that usually means the easier contrast to read. And for me, that's going to be dark text on a white background. By having the darker blue with white text, you're naturally drawing my human eye to the right side of the page. And it's really hard for me to see here that you've got the experience that I'm looking for a particular role to fill. And so if you're applying for that entry-level job, you probably want your skills and your projects over here on the right side of the page, because that's the first thing that my eye is going to be drawn to. Or it might draw through the contact information because this is less compact than this text over here with the work experience. And so you're kind of drawing my eye across your contact and then down into the jobs, and I'm going to continue to kind of come down this way. And so I'm going to end up missing a lot of the project work and things like that over here. So I would probably rearrange this. Again, this is just my own opinion. I'd probably put the skills and the projects as the top half of this page. Now, how important are these other jobs? Again, bullet points shouldn't be multiple lines. I would try to reduce those, and if necessary, reduce the font size. Don't go smaller than 10 point, but make this 10 point font. See if you can condense the bullet points down to be, one line, taking up, most of the space. Like, see if you can bring these bullet points back a little bit instead of having all of this extra white space in here. If you really need to, have the words on there. From an overall like layout point of view and aesthetics point of view, it's a nice layout. But I think that there's a lot of text over here on this right side of the page that they're just not going to read. Like, they're not going to sit here and read like multiple lines of text. They just want quick bullet points. When your eye speed reads bullet points, you're only picking up the first 5 or 6 words anyway. And so you're missing all of this stuff on the second half of the line anyway. So that's why I recommend, like, don't make your bullet points super long. They're not going to see the text anyway. They're consciously not going to pick up those words. So make those bullet points short. Ideally, you want to make it about halfway across the page, at most about 2/3 across like the width of that container. But you certainly don't want to go all the way across. You certainly don't want to wrap multiple lines. So that's just my own take on that. But yeah, for me, I would put the technical skill and the projects and your technical training on the right side, because that's the most important stuff for me for hiring for that kind of role. Awards, it's great to have awards on there. I would say if some of the stuff is not as important, like, it's important to show that you've been employable, but I don't know that you need to call it out on the right side of the page. I would put these jobs over here on the left side. If you've got space, so I would have, me personally, I would put your skills and then your projects and then your training. And if you have time at the bottom, I would put your military service on here. Again, I think you could reduce some of this a little bit because this is part of who you are, but this isn't your role now. And so I don't know that you need to explain your military background in quite so much text. I think you can compress it, not reduce it. I want to be careful not to use the word reduce because I don't want you to think that I'm saying it's not important. But I think you could compress it in a way that you don't have to explain as much about these roles. But I think it's a good thing to have on a resume. If you've got military experience, put the military experience on here, and you can put it down at the bottom of the right side of the page. But get your skills up top, get your projects under that, get your education under that. So I want to see, like, what have you done? Like, what do you claim to know? Where have you practiced it? Where have you learned it for an entry-level dev? If you're like an intermediate or a senior level dev, I want to see what do you know? Where have you used those skills? And so it would be like your skills block and then your work experience and then anything else you want to tell me. That's just my preference when I'm looking at entry-level resumes. And so I would move a lot of these over to that other side. Now, you've got your app over here. I like that they've actually got real live links to their application as well as links to GitHub on here. The reason I like this is because if all I see is a GitHub repo, it's like, okay, cool, you can write code and you can put it on GitHub. So can my 12-year-old. But by putting a live link on here, I can see that you can write working code. You can not only write code, but you can make a working application and you know about deployment and you can actually get it live for me to experience what you've built. For me, this is way more powerful than just a GitHub repo. I'm also hoping that your GitHub repo has a README file that links over to that application and that maybe your application has a footer that says, hey, this project is open source. Here's the GitHub repo. So have everything linked to one another on these things. I think that would be super important as well. Gonna go take a look at some stuff in chat. Dota's been sending lots of text. I appreciate that, Dota. Do you think he's coding in those roles? I'm not sure if that was the previous resume or this one. The reason I ask is none of those job description items are technical. It's just more personal stuff. There's tech stuff in the projects. Yeah, I'd reorganize that. It took easily 5 minutes for me to realize that. Yeah, exactly. If it takes me a while to like scan over a resume going, what does this person know? Like, are they a good fit for this job? It's hard to find that on this resume for me. And Dota, it took him several minutes to try to like piece together like, oh, you say you're a software engineer, but it's actually like none of the stuff over here tells me that you're a software engineer. Like most of this side of the page has nothing to do with software development at all. And so it would be important to reduce that. Keep this quantifiable stuff, like you managed 500,000 worth of facility upgrades. Like keep that kind of stuff on there. But I would reduce that other text on here. I would also trim out Git, REST APIs, and GitHub under tech skills. I would trim out GitHub. I think GitHub is not really a skill. GitHub is just a wrapper for Git. Git is still like, yeah, it's like the most important software kind of repository, used today. I think it's still important to show that you know Git, though. Having a link to GitHub does kind of say like, yes, obviously I can use Git because I use GitHub. But I think because of what we teach at Turing, I know that there's more to that than just, I know GitHub. Like they actually know how to do branching and a lot of command line stuff with Git based on the curriculum at Turing. So having Git on there, I think is okay. Having RESTful API development on there, I think is important because we do teach REST development at Turing as well as RESTful API consumption. And so they're both building APIs and consuming APIs. So calling out that you do RESTful APIs, I think in this case is appropriate for that resume. You link to GitHub. Yeah, so I mean, just linking GitHub. Yeah, it's kind of like, okay, well, I know enough about Git to do like a Git add and a Git commit, but that doesn't mean that I can do branching and merge conflicts and all that kind of stuff that we actually teach at Turing. And so by putting Git on there, I'm more likely to ask deeper questions about Git, about like, how have you done branching? How have you done this or that? Can you do, merge conflict resolution on the command line, or do you use GitHub for those? Like, I can ask more questions to better ascertain your skills by seeing the word Git on the resume. Now, if you list GitHub as a skill and I search for, I need somebody that knows about Git, it's still going to pick up Git as part of GitHub. But again, if I were writing code for an applicant tracking system, if I was searching for a word and that word was part of a compound word, I would give it less of a score. So if I'm searching for Git and I see GitHub, I would treat that differently than if I actually saw the word Git on the page by itself, where it was actually the whole word by itself. But that's if I was coding an ATS. I've never actually coded one, but and so I don't know whether an applicant tracking system would actually give different weight because it found it as part of a compound word, or whether it found it as a standalone word. Same kind of thing with the indentation. So I like some of the indentation you've done over here for the projects, but again, because this column is pretty narrow compared to the right side of the page, having like multiple levels of indentation in here is just taking up space. And so I don't think that it's as necessary. I would rather see these projects put out here on the right side where you're really calling out, like, this is why I call myself a software engineer or a software developer. Like, you know, I did this, I built this thing, this was a group project or this was a solo project. Like, I like to see that kind of stuff called out as well. Where it's a little bit harder to see because you've condensed these projects so much, it's harder for me to tell how you've actually practiced some of these skills. So that would be some of my takeaway on this one for Brian, who up here in the very top up here in the tab left their name as part of that. Otherwise, they did a pretty good job anonymizing this, except for the actual links for their app and their repo actually go over to their real GitHub. Well, actually, the repo. Actually, this repo one is no longer a link. These other ones are. This repo one is not a link, but these other ones do, and they actually go over to. Looks like they actually go over to a real GitHub account. So. Let's see what else Dota says in chat. If he's going for manager, he should say number of staff he managed in the management roles. Yeah, again, but it does depend on the kind of role. So if I had a management type of role open, I would like a technical management role. This would actually be a pretty good resume for a technical manager because you've got technical skill, you've built out projects, and you're showing me management experience plus your military experience. And so, yeah, I agree with Dota on that. I would want to call out more about the management experience. But that's if this was for a management role. If I was using this resume for a software development role, I would overhaul this resume quite a bit, just so that it screams, I am a software developer. Right now, there's a lot of stuff on here that says I'm not a software developer. And then again, when it comes to the dates, I would put months on here as well. Because it's hard for me to tell, like, was this like a 1 month program? Was it an all year program? Like, when during 2021 did you attend Turing? For something like Colorado State University, you can just put your graduation year on there and just say graduated 2017. You don't have to tell me when you started. And fewer companies care about GPA. Saying that you graduated magna cum laude is fine. If you have other distinctions or things like that, you can definitely add those on there too.